It is the 23rd of June, somewhere in Western Europe. The sun drops behind a row of suburban rooftops and the streetlights click on. Behind closed windows, screens glow blue. The longest day of the year has just ended, and almost no one noticed. Rewind 700 years, same evening, same land. Every hilltop is on fire. From Ireland to Russia, from Norway to Greece, hundreds of bonfires blaze across the darkness, deliberately, joyfully, and all at once. This was Midsummer's Eve, and it was not a celebration. It was something far older and far more necessary than that. Children had spent days dragging handcarts door to door, collecting brushwood, straw, old fence posts. Every household was expected to contribute. In parts of Germany, a man who gave nothing to the bonfire would see no blessing on his crops. His hemp would never grow. His neighbors would remember. In the town of Konz, above the river Moselle, a massive wooden wheel was packed with straw from every household. 2 handles jutted from the axle. At nightfall, the men climbed to the summit of the Stromberg Hill. Women positioned themselves at a spring halfway down. The mayor of neighboring Cirque raised his hand. A torch touched the straw. The wheel erupted into flame, and 2 young men seized the handles and ran. Down the hill they sprinted, the burning wheel scattering sparks like a comet dragged to earth. The women screamed with joy as it thundered past. Villages on the far bank of the Moselle answered with their own fires. The goal was to plunge the wheel, still burning, into the river. Success meant an abundant vintage and a wagon load of white wine from surrounding estates. Failure meant only the hope that next year's arms would be faster. Across Europe, the same night unfolded simultaneously. In Bavaria, farmers drove cattle through the flames to cure the sick and protect the healthy. Householders extinguished their own hearth and relit it from the communal bonfire, as if the old flame had gone stale. In Swabia, young couples held hands and leapt over the fire, chanting, "Flax, flax, may the flax grow 7 ells high." In Bohemia, couples peered at each other through wildflower wreaths across the flames, reading the fire for signs of marriage. A girl who saw 9 bonfires that night was guaranteed a husband within the year. In Norway, this was the night witches flew toward the Blocksberg. The bonfires were shields to keep them at bay. A 13th century writer, Jacobus de Voragine, recorded an even stranger belief. In pagan times, people burned animal bones because the smoke repelled dragons that copulated in the summer air and poisoned wells with their seed. It sounds like superstition, but burning rotting carcasses at the height of summer genuinely reduced disease. The logic was wrong. The result was right. When the fires burned low, people leaped over the embers 3 times. They gathered charred sticks and tucked them into rooftops against lightning, scattered ashes across fields against blight, crowned themselves with mugwort against ghosts and sore eyes. None of this was in any Bible. None of it was taught in any church. Yet for millions, it was the most necessary thing they did all year. To understand why, you must first understand what came before the fire: the cold, the silence, and the months when summer was not a season, but a prayer. The medieval year did not begin with optimism. It began with survival. In January, across northern Europe, the sun offered perhaps 8 hours of pale light. A peasant family lived in a single-room dwelling with a dirt floor and a fire pit that filled the space with smoke. They slept together, often sharing the room with livestock, because animal heat was not a luxury but a necessity. There were no books, almost no one could read. No visitors, the roads were impassable mud. The church held weekly services, but they were conducted in Latin, which no one in the congregation understood. For months, the world shrank to the size of one room, one fire, one set of faces. By February, the stored grain was dwindling, salted meat grew rancid, root vegetables softened in their pits. The gap between winter stores and the first spring growth was called the Hungry Gap, and it killed people every year, not in great famines that chroniclers recorded, but quietly, one weakened body at a time. Infants first, then the elderly, then anyone the cold had already hollowed out. This was not poverty in the modern sense. This was the baseline of human existence across most of European history. Then the light returned. March brought longer days, but not warmth. April brought warmth, but not safety. The fields demanded plowing, brutal labor behind an ox on soil that had frozen and thawed until it felt like stone. But something else was happening. People could go outside. For 5 months, they had been sealed in a cramped, dark, smoke-filled room. The open sky was not a backdrop, it was liberation. And with that liberation came the only culture most medieval people would ever know: performance. In a world without literacy, stories could not be read, they had to be performed, sung, danced, acted, shouted. A minstrel was not a musician, he was a one-man spectacle: singer, juggler, acrobat, puppeteer, mimic. Traveling players in grotesque masks tumbled into market squares, sang bawdy songs, staged improvised Robin Hood fights, and vanished before the priest could object. The priest always objected. The carols that people sang while dancing in circles were frequently obscene, banned from churches entirely. A 14th century cleric wrote with contempt, "Dances, cards, summer games, of many such come many shames." The summer games themselves, where young couples were elected king and queen, where dice and ale flowed freely, were denounced as sources of licentiousness. But the clergy could offer no replacement. They had sermons in a dead language about a book no one could read. The summer fair had fire eaters, wrestling, and Robin Hood. The competition was not close. So the peasant calendar took a shape no document recorded, but everyone understood. Winter was endurance. Spring was labor. Summer was the narrow window when life became more than survival, when stories were told, debts were settled, lovers were found, and the world opened up. But all of it was prelude. The markets, the plays, the archery, and the ale. Everything was building toward a single night. The night the sun reached its peak and began to fall. The night every crossroad in Europe answered the turning sky with fire. Midsummer was coming, and the first place you would feel it arrive was the summer fair. The fair began before dawn. Merchants arrived in the dark, hauling carts loaded with wool, leather, spices, pottery, and salted fish. By first light, a temporary city had risen, rows of wooden stalls and canvas tents stretching across fields that a week earlier had been empty pasture. The largest fairs, like Stourbridge near Cambridge or St. Bartholomew's at Smithfield, drew thousands. Entire streets were laid out by trade: the spice row, the cloth row, the livestock pen. The air smelled of animal dung, crushed herbs, and smoke from cooking fires that would not go out until nightfall. By mid-morning, the crowd was thick. Peasants who had walked for hours mingled with traveling merchants, minor nobles, monks buying supplies for distant abbeys, and pickpockets who had arrived even earlier than the merchants. Hawkers shouted prices, livestock bellowed, children darted between legs. A medieval fair was not a gentle marketplace. It was loud, dense, and slightly dangerous. At noon, the spectacles began. Jousting was the crown jewel. Armored knights on war horses, charging at full gallop, lances splintering on impact, the crowd roaring. But participation required wealth that no commoner could dream of. The armor alone cost more than a peasant family earned in a lifetime. Ordinary people watched, then turned to their own contests, archery tournaments, where the longbowmen who would later win battles at Crécy and Agincourt tested their aim, and wrestling matches, where village strongmen grappled in the dirt for pride and small wagers. In the afternoon, the performers took over. Minstrels were not simple musicians. A single minstrel might sing, juggle, walk on his hands, perform with a trained dog, and deliver a dramatic monologue, all in the same act. Troops of players arrived in bizarre costumes and grotesque masks, staging bawdy sketches that the clergy despised but the crowd adored. A surviving Robin Hood play from the 15th century fits on a single sheet of paper. Mostly stage directions for archery and fight scenes with almost no written dialogue. It was performed outdoors, largely improvised and built for action rather than words. The singing was constant. Caroling in the Middle Ages meant forming a circle, holding hands, and dancing while singing, and the songs were rarely religious. They were love songs, drinking songs, mocking songs, and songs so vulgar that caroling was banned inside churches. As late as 1497, it was still officially condemned as a dissolute pastime. The clergy recorded these traditions only to denounce them. One cleric's summary of a folk play involved killer rabbits, jousting bears, drunken sermons, and an obscenely gluttonous king. By evening, the fair's mood shifted. Dice and cards appeared. Ale flowed. Arguments that had simmered all day broke into fights. The same cleric who had watched the afternoon's entertainments with pursed lips now had something worse to report. Dances, cards, summer games, of many such come many shames. But the fair was only the daytime face of medieval summer. When the last stalls were shuttered and the last drunk was dragged from the field, the calendar was still counting towards something larger, something that required no merchant, no minstrel, no admission, only fire. The fires were not spontaneous, they were engineered. Weeks before Midsummer's Eve, communities began stockpiling fuel. 9 different types of wood were required in parts of Scandinavia. In Bohemia, young men felled a tall fir tree, carried it to a hilltop, and the girls decorated it with nosegays, leaf wreaths, and red ribbons before brushwood was piled around its base. In North Africa, where Berber tribes observed the same night under the name Lansara, the fuel was chosen for its smoke: giant fennel, thyme, rue, chamomile, plants that would fill the air with thick aromatic clouds believed to carry protective power across fields and into homes. At dusk, on June 23rd, the fires were lit. And what happened next was not worship in any form a church would recognize. It was something raw. The first act was the leap. From Swabia to Russia, from Bohemia to the Basque country, young men and women held hands and jumped over the bonfire. This was not recklessness, it was agricultural magic. "Grow that the hemp may be 3 ells high," they shouted as they flew over the flames. The higher the leap, the taller the crop. The parents of whoever jumped highest could expect the most abundant harvest. In Bavaria, the height of the flames themselves predicted how high the flax would grow that year. The fire was not a symbol of the harvest, it was the harvest, set in motion by human muscle and human faith. The second act was purification. Cattle were driven through the flames or between twin bonfires, not as punishment, but as medicine. Sick animals were cured, healthy ones were armored against plague for the coming year. In parts of the Tyrol, householders extinguished every fire in the house, then relit their hearth from a brand carried home from the communal bonfire. The domestic flame was reborn from the public one. Collective life was renewed by collective ritual. The third act was divination. In Bohemia, young men and women stood on opposite sides of the fire and looked at each other through wreaths of wildflowers, searching the flames for a sign, fidelity, marriage, the future itself flickering between them. The singed wreaths were carried home and kept for a full year. During thunderstorms, a piece was burned on the hearth. Bits were fed to sick cattle. The rest was used to fumigate house and stable so that man and beast might keep hale and well. And then were the wheels. Burning wheels rolled down hillsides across Germany, Austria, France, and the British Isles. In the Vale of Glamorgan, a cartwheel swathed in straw was set alight and sent tumbling down a hill. If it burned the entire way and blazed for a long time at the bottom, an abundant harvest was expected. A medieval writer explained the symbolism plainly. The wheel represented the sun, which, having reached its highest point in the sky, now began its long descent. The rolling fire was not a bonfire. It was a mirror of the cosmos, the human answer to a celestial turning that no one could stop, but everyone could mark. By midnight, the hilltops across Europe were galaxies of dying embers. People gathered the ashes. They scattered them in gardens to kill caterpillars, pressed charred sticks into cabbage patches, inserted them into the thatched roofs of their homes to prevent fire. A strange inversion, using the remains of fire as a ward against fire. Girls who had looked at the flames through garlands of wildflowers 3 times believed their eyes would stay strong for a year. Those who had leapt 3 times believed fever could not touch them until the next solstice. The night cooled, the embers grayed. The smell of smoke and mugwort hung in the air like a second sky. And somewhere in every parish across the continent, a priest watched from his window and wondered how to make it stop. He never would. The Midsummer bonfire is older than Christianity by at least 1,000 years. Iron Age carvings from Scandinavia, dated to the centuries before Christ, show sun worship rituals aligned with the solstice. Stonehenge, built between 3000 and 2000 BC, is oriented so that the summer solstice sunrise falls precisely over the heel stone. Long before any church existed, humans understood that the longest day was a hinge, the moment the sun stopped climbing and began to fall. And they responded the only way they knew how, by building their own sun on the ground. When Christianity spread across Europe, it faced a problem. The solstice was already taken. People already had a ritual for this night, and it was deeply embedded in the rhythms of agricultural life, in planting, harvesting, breeding, and disease prevention. The church could not simply cancel it, so it did something more clever. It absorbed it. June 24th became the feast of the Nativity of St. John the Baptist. The timing was elegant. Christ's birth on December 25th, John's birth on June 24th, exactly 6 months apart.
the two great figures of Christianity placed at the two great turning points of the solar year. The bonfires were reinterpreted as symbols of John's burning spiritual light, a faint tinge of Christianity, as the anthropologist James Fraser put it, was painted over a celebration that predated the faith by millennia.
But the paint never dried. Underneath the saint's name, every element of the old ritual survived intact. The leaping was not about John. The cattle driving was not about baptism. The mugwort crowns, the wildflower divination, the dragon-repelling bone smoke, the spinning wheels of fire, none of it had any connection to Christian theology. The church changed the label, the contents were untouched. Why could the church not extinguish it? The answer lies in how medieval religion actually functioned at the village level. The peasant majority could not read. The Bible was unavailable to them. Most rural churches did not own a copy. The Mass was in Latin, a language they did not speak. Theology was an abstraction that existed in monasteries and universities, not in the fields where people lived. For these people, religion was not doctrine, it was practice, physical, sensory, communal. You did not understand your faith, you performed it. You lit a fire, you jumped over it, you burned herbs, you danced, you drove your cattle through smoke. These were not superstitions layered on top of Christianity. For the peasant, these acts were Christianity, or at least they were the only form of spiritual life that made sense in a world where the priest's words were incomprehensible and the nearest book was 50 miles away. The church recognized this and raged against it for centuries. Bishops issued condemnations, synods banned specific practices, priests were instructed to preach against the fires. But the condemnations themselves reveal how futile the effort was. The same prohibitions appear in church records century after century, which means they were being ignored century after century.
And then there is the most unsettling evidence of all. The midsummer bonfire is not only a European Christian phenomenon. In Morocco, Algeria, and across North Africa, Muslim, Berber, and Arab-speaking communities observe the identical night with identical rituals. Bonfires, leaping, smoke purification, herbal protection, cattle driving. The Islamic calendar is purely lunar. It has no mechanism for marking the solar solstice. There is no Islamic reason for this festival to exist. Yet it does, under the name Lansada, on the same date, with the same fire. This means the midsummer bonfire is not Christian, not Islamic, not tied to any scripture or prophet. It is older than all of them. A human reflex so deep that neither the cross nor the crescent could uproot it. Two of the most powerful religious systems in history tried to claim it, rename it, or suppress it. Both failed. The fire belonged to something that preceded faith itself, the body's memory of what the sun meant, and the hand's need to answer it. And yet, eventually, the fires did go out. Not because a pope decreed it or a sermon persuaded anyone. The force that finally killed the midsummer bonfire was something no medieval peasant could have predicted. It was the city. By the middle of the 16th century, the bonfires had vanished from London. Not because anyone stopped believing in them, because the city had grown too dense, too wooden, too flammable. Enormous fires on street corners were no longer sacred, they were insurance liabilities. Municipal authorities concerned with order and property quietly regulated the processions, restricted the fuel, and let the tradition die of administrative suffocation. No dramatic ban, no confrontation, just the slow withdrawal of permission until the night of June 23rd became ordinary. In 1598, a man named John Stow published his survey of London and wrote about the midsummer fires in the past tense, with the unmistakable tone of someone describing a world he had heard about but never seen. He remembered, or reported that others remembered, how the wealthier citizens used to set out tables in front of their doors near the bonfires, furnished with sweet bread and good drink, and invited neighbors and even passing strangers to sit and be merry. He noted, with something close to longing, that these fires were called bonfires not only for warmth, but for good amity, because neighbors who had been at controversy were there, by the labor of others, reconciled, and made of bitter enemies loving friends. The bonfires had not only marked the solstice, they had performed a social function that no other institution could replicate: the annual public fire-lit dissolution of grudges. When the fires disappeared, that function disappeared with them. Nothing replaced it. Rural communities held on longer. In the west of England, in Brittany, in the remote valleys of the Alps and the Pyrenees, the midsummer fires continued to burn well into the 19th century. But even there, the meaning was fading. What had once been an entire community's most important night was becoming a quaint local custom, practiced by fewer people each year, watched by the old and ignored by the young. And then, at almost exactly the moment the real fires were dying, a playwright in London captured their ghost. William Shakespeare wrote A Midsummer Night's Dream around 1595 or 1596. By then, almost no one in his London audience had ever experienced an actual midsummer festival. The bonfires had been cold for decades. But Shakespeare filled his play with everything the night had once contained: enchantment, transformation, chaos, desire, the blurring of boundaries between the human world and something older and wilder. The forest in the play is not a setting. It is the midsummer bonfire translated into language, a space where the normal rules collapse, where identities shift, where lovers are rearranged by forces they cannot see or control. The festival that the city had killed, the stage preserved. What the body could no longer perform, the imagination continued to carry. Today, the echoes are faint but unmistakable. In Sweden, Midsummer remains a national holiday. Families gather around flower-wrapped maypoles, eat pickled herring and fresh strawberries, and dance in patterns that no one can fully explain, but everyone knows. In Finland, midsummer bonfires, juhannuskoko, still blaze on lake shores. At Stonehenge, tens of thousands gather every June to watch the solstice sunrise between stones that were placed there 5,000 years ago for exactly this purpose. The forms have changed. The bonfire is now a barbecue. The mugwort crown is a flower garland bought at a market stall. The leap over the flames is a memory that survives only in folklore anthologies and footnotes. But the impulse, the need to go outside on the longest night of the year, to gather, to light something, to stay up later than reason allows, that impulse has not been extinguished. Medieval peasants could not write their own history. They had no books, no archives, no monuments. But every June, they lit a fire, leaped over it, and sang, and in doing so, passed something forward that no chronicler could carry. The transmission system eventually broke. The songs were forgotten. The mugwort lost its meaning. The dragons stopped flying. But somewhere in the unnamed restlessness that pulls us outdoors on a warm summer night, in the way a bonfire holds our attention longer than it should,
in the strange reluctance to go inside when the sky is still light at 10 o'clock. Somewhere in all of that, a thread remains. Not a memory exactly, something older. The faintest heat from a fire that burned across an entire continent every year for 1,000 years on the night the sun stood still and began to fall.